The sun was pouring through the kitchen windows that morning, drenching everything in a soft gold that should have felt peaceful. But peace was the last thing in my chest when it happened. I had reached up toward the top shelf, stretching, straining, trying to look like I had everything under control, when I felt a hand at my waist. Firm, steady, completely unexpected. My entire body went still as if the warm daylight had frozen in midair. In that moment, I couldn't think straight. Not because of fear, but because something in that touch, gentle but sure, brought back every buried ache, every memory I had tried to outrun, and every hope I pretended I didn't deserve. It was the first moment in months that made my heart trip over itself, reminding me I was still alive in ways I had forgotten. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us we're stronger than we think, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kind Heart Stories. Your support helps keep these heartwarming tales alive. The hand belonged to Rowan Hale, a man I barely knew 3 weeks earlier but somehow already felt entangled with. He was my new neighbor, the kind who brought over fresh peaches from the local orchard without being asked, and noticed when someone was trying too hard to appear fine. The kind of man who could smile in a way that made a room soften. I was not used to men like him, not since the wreckage left behind by a past I still tiptoed around. But Rowan didn't know any of that then. All he knew was that I was standing on a chair I probably had no business standing on, stubbornly reaching for a plate while refusing help for the 5th time. I had moved into this small house on the edge of Brindleford Valley 6 months earlier, after leaving behind a life that had grown too heavy for my heart to carry. I wasn't running away, I told myself that every day, but I was definitely trying to start over. The days here were gentle, marked by the quiet chatter of birds and the wind combing through the fields. But the quiet also made memories louder, and some nights I could still feel the echo of the arguments I used to lose, the blame I carried like a shadow, and the exhaustion that built from giving too much to someone who never gave anything back. I had sworn I didn't need anyone, especially not someone with eyes that noticed too much. Yet somehow, Rowan seemed to appear wherever the cracks in my armor showed. The first time we met, I was struggling to carry a box of books from my car, pretending the weight didn't bother me. He crossed the yard with a calm confidence that made my heartbeat stutter, lifted the box effortlessly, and flashed a smile that made me forget how to breathe. After that, he always seemed to be nearby painting his front porch, tending to flowers, or fixing something I didn't exactly ask him to fix, but didn't stop him from fixing either. Still, I kept distance. I thought distance made me safe. That morning, his hand on my waist pulled me back from more than just a wobbling chair. It grounded me in a way I hadn't felt since long before my life had fallen apart. When he steadied me, the warmth of his touch seeped through the thin cotton of my shirt and sent a ripple through the parts of me I'd locked away. I felt breathe again, but shakier, unsure, and painfully aware of how long it had been since someone treated me with simple, genuine care. The moment passed quickly. He moved away, apologizing gently, and reached the plate effortlessly with his height. I murmured thanks, but my voice felt like it had traveled miles to reach my lips. When I turned from the counter, he was already stepping toward the doorway, sunlight outlining him like he belonged in the brightness I had been denying myself. After he left, I stood there, staring at the plate in my hands. It was such a small thing, a plate, a steadying hand, but it felt like the universe nudging open a door I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. The days that followed unfolded slowly, like the valley itself was taking time to reveal what I needed to see. I found myself watching Rowan more than I meant to, how he helped Mrs. Alder carry her groceries, how he raked fallen leaves in the park before anyone asked, how he laughed in a way that made his shoulders relax as if the world didn't weigh on him the way it weighed on me. I envied that ease. And a part of me feared it. People like him, I thought, wouldn't want to be tangled in the mess of someone like me. But Rowan didn't keep his distance. He never pushed, but he always showed up not with demands or expectations, but with a steady presence that felt oddly safe. He stopped by with fresh herbs from his garden, helped me fix the creaking hinge on my screen door, and once even brought a book he thought I'd like. Each small gesture lowered a brick from the wall around my heart, even though I tried to keep it intact. Still, every kindness he offered made memories sharpen those years when kindness was rare, when shouting filled the rooms of the home I left, when believing I was the problem became second nature. I struggled to trust small things now, because I had once ignored the small warnings. and they had grown into storms that nearly broke me. One particularly bright afternoon, when the valley felt alive with the scent of early summer, Rowan invited me to join him at the community garden. At first, I pretended I had other plans, but he simply nodded and said he'd leave the gate open if I changed my mind. Hours later, after fighting with myself, I found my feet carrying me there. The garden was bursting with colors, yellows, purples, greens, and Rowan was kneeling in the soil, humming softly as he worked. He looked up at me with a smile that didn't surprise or overwhelm, just welcomed. Being there made me feel something I hadn't felt in so long, included. We spent the afternoon tending to plants, and as we worked, something inside me softened. The air was warm, the sky bright, and every now and then, Rowan brushed past me with the easy familiarity of someone who simply liked being near. And for the first time since my life had changed so drastically, I felt the beginnings of something like hope. I wasn't ready to name it, but I felt it, quietly, insistently. Weeks passed, and the valley deepened into summer. I found myself laughing more, sleeping better, and waking with the faint feeling that life didn't have to be something I braced myself against. But healing isn't a straight line. One evening, after receiving a message from my past that reopened wounds I thought had begun to heal, I crumbled. Memories rushed back with ruthless clarity. The fear, the blame, the feeling that I wasn't enough, or too much, or always wrong. I curled up on the living room floor, shaking, frustrated with myself for not being over it yet. I didn't want anyone to see me like that, especially Rowan. But when he knocked on my door with a bag of oranges from the market, I couldn't ignore him fast enough. He called my name once, twice, then quietly let himself back onto the porch, as if giving me space. I thought the moment had passed, until a few minutes later, I heard the soft scrape of something against the door. When I opened it, I found the bag of oranges there, along with a small note written in his patient handwriting. "You don't have to be sunny every day to be worth showing up for." I sank to the floor with the note in my hand, and cried harder than I had in months, but this time, the tears felt like release instead of collapse. The next morning, I found him trimming the hedges between our yards. I hesitated, but he looked up, and something about the calm in his eyes told me I didn't need to pretend, so I didn't. I stepped closer, letting the silence stretch between us. He didn't reach out or crowd me, he just stood there, patient as sunlight. And for the first time, I told someone the truth, not everything, not the darkest pieces, but enough. Enough to admit that I had been hurt, that I had been lost, that I didn't know how to let someone be close again. Rowan listened with a stillness that felt like shelter. When I finally finished, he nodded once in quiet understanding. No promises, no pressure, just the simple assurance that he wasn't going anywhere unless I asked him to. From that day forward, things changed. Not all at once, but gradually. I began letting myself enjoy our long walks through the valley, our shared meals when neither of us felt like cooking, and the soft familiarity that grew between us like something rooted in kindness, not urgency. There were still moments when I pulled away without meaning to, moments when I felt overwhelmed by how gentle he was after all the years I'd spent learning to brace for the opposite. But Rowan met every hesitation with patience and care, as if healing were something we were doing together, one breath at a time. Then came another bright morning, one much like the day he reached for the plate. I was setting the table for a small lunch we planned to have before he headed to help paint the community center. The sunlight spilled warm across the room. I reached again for the top shelf for another plate, standing on my toes out of stubborn habit. And again, before I could blink, Rowan stepped behind me with that same steady presence, placing one warm hand at my waist. Only this time, I didn't freeze. I didn't flinch. I leaned into it, letting the warmth settle into my bones like something I finally trusted. I realized then how far I had come, from a woman flinching at her own shadow, to someone learning to let comfort in. And Rowan wasn't the reason I healed, he simply reminded me I was still capable of healing at all. As I stepped down from the shelf, he looked at me with the softest question in his eyes, but he didn't need to ask. I felt my heart answer on its own. For the first time, the future didn't feel frightening. It felt possible. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kind Hearts Stories. Your engagement helps these emotional, hope-filled stories reach more people who may need them. Before we end, special request, Please comment the word hope if you believe healing is possible for anyone. And as the sun lifted higher above Brindleford Valley that day, warming the world in gold, I understood something I never thought I'd feel again, that sometimes, the simplest touch at the right moment can guide us back to ourselves. One gentle breath, one steady hand, one act of kindness at a time.